Hey, welcome back to Everything Phil Collins. Scott here. Today is kind of a special episode in a special time of the week. And that's because as I record this right now, it's Saturday, April 12th, which, if you're a record collector, a music fan, you probably know is Record Store Day. So happy Record Store Day to all you vinyl collectors and record collectors and CD and tape collectors out there. Music enthusiasts, hi-fi enthusiasts, lo-fi enthusiasts, and of course to our record store owners and the people who run record stores. I love record stores. As you know, I just a couple weeks ago published a video where I went to a bunch of different record stores. I'm not at a record store today, but what I want to do is I want to share with you my 3 favorite vinyl records. And of course, they're Genesis, Phil Collins, Peter Gabriel related. In fact, one of each. Because we're talking today about the love of vinyl, and there's something special about that, something really cool I'm excited to share with you after I show you these records. So stick around because I have something really, really important I want to share with you, especially for those who love vinyl and love record stores. My first favorite vinyl record is thanks to my friend George, a viewer of this channel, who sent me this copy of this record, which is incredible because this is not a record you'll find ever in a record store. And if you do, you're very, very lucky. And this is a bootleg. This is somewhat of a bootleg. I believe it's actually an audio rip of a broadcast, potentially a TV broadcast, but more likely the Laserdisc or the VHS of Phil Collins' No Ticket Required. So this is a live album. It's kind of a little bit of a truncated version of the No Jacket Required show. And again, this is like very similar to the VHS and Laserdisc that would have come out in the late 80s from the No Jacket Required tour. And it has Only You and I Know opens up, Against All Odds, Sue Studio, Who Said I Would, Hand in Hand, which is great. You don't get that very often on a live record because it's not on Serious Hits. The cover, It's All Right, and Droned. Anyway, very, very, very cool. This is one of my favorite. This is if not my favorite Phil Collins record I own because it's so rare. I love this album. I love this tour. And for whatever reason, the record labels and management haven't given us a really great Phil Collins show, aside from Serious Hits, which again is just Serious Hits. So there's so much Phil Collins live material that should be released. And that's why in my vinyl collection, I'll tell you what, God forbid, if the house was burning down, I would grab that record. I'd probably grab all 3 of these records that I'm showing today. To be honest with you, I'd probably grab all my records. I would hug them out the door. I would get second-degree burns, and I would try to save as much as I can. But that's one I think I would grab just because it's meaningful. Thank you, George. But it's also really, really hard to find. Let me know in the comments if you have that record. If you've ever seen that in a record store, it's a bootleg, right? So it's harder to find. They don't sell them on Discogs because they're not legal. Okay. That's a solo record from Genesis. The other solo artist you may not have heard of is Peter Gabriel. And let me show you my favorite Peter Gabriel vinyl I have. This is actually quite a rare record. It also has a marketing sticker, although that was right on the record. And this is Shakin' the Tree, which is Peter Gabriel's first greatest hits record. And I think he's had like a second one after this and then some other compilation stuff. I love how beat up this is. Like, this looks almost skeuomorphic, as if people have like intentionally put tape here, stickers here, there's some stamps, there's weird stuff. The jacket, it would be poor condition. I actually had to buy this off of Discogs because it is so impossible to find. Like any records from the early 90s, like We Can't Dance, like Serious Hits, all very, very hard records to find on vinyl. I'll tell you why this record is important to me and meaningful to me. First of all, I love how beat up it is. It reflects just how much I listened to it and how much I didn't beat up this way. It came this way. But, surprisingly, the 16, this is 12 Golden Greats, but the tape and the CD version have more. A couple more, I think Red Rain and a couple other songs are on the extended version. But I'll tell you why that record is meaningful to me. Is I didn't really know who Peter Gabriel was when I was a teenager, aside from the fact that I think he was associated with Phil Collins' band at some point. So I wasn't overly familiar. Remember, there wasn't the internet back then. I couldn't just Google it. So if you didn't know, you didn't know. You'd have to go to a music store, buy a book or whatever. And so as a teenager, I knew Peter Gabriel was originally part of the band, didn't know very much about that at all, and wasn't very familiar with his solo career, aside from I had heard Mercy Street and loved it on a movie soundtrack. But I was doing Columbia House. Raise your hand if you remember, if you're old enough to remember Columbia House. And I had to pick out, what was it, 20 CDs, 12 CDs? I think it was 12, maybe 12 and a bonus. And so I was going through the catalog and I was picking out these CDs, and I kind of ran out of CDs I wanted. And so I saw Peter Gabriel Greatest Hits, and I thought, well, that'd be a good way to learn about him. Anyway, I listened to that album front to back, nonstop, over and over. So the second I heard Salisbury Hill, I was like, and to this day, it's, if not my favorite solo of any solo artist song. Anyway, it's such a great tune. But then, like, I Don't Remember and Sledgehammer and Don't Give Up and Shaking the Tree and Biko. And, I mean, my gosh, Family Snapshot. There was just so many songs. Mercy Street, of course. Like, I was just, it was just like my entry point into Peter Gabriel. And so that's why that record is meaningful to me. And to be able to find it on vinyl, I love it so much. Before I show you my Genesis pick, my favorite Genesis vinyl record and why it's important to me, and it's a huge shout out to record stores. But before I do that, I want to tell you about another project that I'm a part of that has nothing to do with Phil Collins. It has nothing to do with Genesis. And that's a podcast called For the Love of Vinyl. This is a podcast I created in partnership with A to Z Media, an incredible pressing plant and production company based out of the US. And this is a podcast, it's a monthly podcast, and it's all about, you guessed it, vinyl and records and record collecting and making records and buying records and collecting records and selling records. I would love it because I know that a lot of you are fans of music, not just Genesis and Phil Collins, but fans of record collecting, record buying. If you love the topic of vinyl, I would love it if you could check out our podcast. You could go to this QR code here, scan it, it'll take you to a link where you could subscribe wherever you get your podcast. You just have to search For the Love of Vinyl. I'll also put a link in the description below. Some of our first episodes that we've launched with is a heartbreaking story of a guy who lost his record collection in the California wildfires. I mean, I just made reference to what would I run out with. It's a devastating story. And so you'll want to hear that interview. I also do an interview with a color specialist at a pressing plant to talk about the color of vinyl and what makes color so popular. We have an interview coming out in just a couple days. By the time you're watching this, it'll be out when you're watching this, it'll be out this coming week with a record store owner from Cincinnati. And we talk all about what it's like to own a record store, to buy record collections, what records sell the best, how they make money, how much money they make, the behind the scenes of owning a record store. You're going to love that episode. Anyway, search For the Love of Vinyl wherever you get your podcasts. And it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe and check this out month after month. Okay, let's get to my favorite Genesis record. Now, this is cheating again because it is also a bootleg. This is Genesis in concert. Has anybody seen this? Is anybody familiar with it? One of the great things I love about bootlegs is the misleading track titles or labels. This is because if the FBI ever, burst into their, basically the reason they would do this is that they could ship nobody in the plant would know what's going on, and they can move these around and import them and ship them around with the jackets separate, so that if they got caught, they wouldn't say Bob Dylan or the Beatles and get them in trouble. So there was ways for them to hide. Anyway, this is a double disc bootleg, and I'm going to tell you a really cool story as to why this is my favorite record. I don't listen to this necessarily more than I say I listen to my copy of Selling England or Duke or Abacab. But the reason why this record is so meaningful to me, and by the way, let me show you this here. So this actually does have some Peter Gabriel bootlegs on here. It's all over the place. A lot of Duke era songs, but then it also, it was recorded May 4th, 1980 at the Theatre Royal in London, England. However, there's also a couple tracks on here that were recorded in the 1975 British tour. So anyway, it's a bootleg. It looks like one of the rare bootlegs that had printed artwork. That was a very, very rare thing. Gold records. I don't even know. It says it was made in Switzerland. You can never really believe these things, but I don't know who was involved with GR. I'm reading a great book about bootlegs right now, and maybe I'll learn about them. I'm learning more about kind of like the OGs in America, right? The trademark of quality and Smoking Pig and all that stuff. Anyway, okay, I'll tell you why this is important to me. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was in a town that I don't visit very often, and I stopped by a record store that I'd never seen before. At the time, I had been just getting into bootleg recordings, digital bootleg recordings, like WAV files, FLAC files, MP3s from the torrent sites, and learning that there are all these, live recordings of Genesis and Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel, mostly Genesis. Believe it or not, as much as I'm obsessed with bootlegs today, about 3 or 4 years ago, I wasn't aware of the bootleg community. It's once you know, but it's not like a highly publicized section of collectors, and there's a lot of misprints, a lot of bootlegs sound inferior, and also the artwork is never super attractive, so it's not a hugely popular type of record in the record collecting community, and some record stores don't carry them, although I don't think anyone has an issue selling them today. Discogs doesn't, they list them, but they don't sell them. Anyway, I didn't know anything about it. I was a huge Genesis fan, but I wasn't familiar with Genesis bootlegs. So I go into this record store and I go right to the G section, right to Genesis, and I start, and there's still a couple titles I didn't have in my collection at that time. Definitely some 12 inches I was looking for. Anyway, I start flipping and I see this, and I've never seen this in my life. I'm like, what am I looking at? Like, this is definitely Genesis. It's definitely the guys. What is this? I immediately grab it. At the same time, they have Yellow Bedside Foam, the other great bootleg. They also have White Mountain, with the pink cover, or maybe my copy's blue. Oh, and then A Living Story. So somebody has just dropped off their Genesis bootleg collection. Anyway, that's why this record is my favorite Genesis record I own, even though it's not an official release. It's because of that. This was my gateway drug into buying bootlegs. And I've since got a lot. And of course, some of you on this channel have sent me some, and I'm super grateful for that. But those are my favorite records because of the meanings behind them. And so I'm curious, what are your favorite Genesis, Phil Collins, or Peter Gabriel, or other records in your vinyl collection if you collect vinyl? Again, thank you for supporting the channel and watching the channel. If you love vinyl, if you're at Record Store Day right now, if you just got back from a record store and you want to dive more into the world of vinyl, collecting, making, selling, listening to vinyl, please check out my new podcast, For the Love of Vinyl. And for once, you'll get to hear me talk about something that isn't Genesis and Phil Collins. So click the link in the description to check out For the Love of Vinyl, and please subscribe, and thanks for watching.